Well, it's a beautiful day in America. How we doing today, guys? It's Jesse with the Common Man Corpus Christi and bringing you some exciting news after last night's elections. So we'll go ahead and start with Texas, and we'll move on to all the cool stuff that happened in Virginia and a few other places. All right, so right here in our own very backyard, Texas District from the Daily Wire, Texas District, roughly 75% Hispanic turns red for GOP. All right, so let's get into this and see what else they've got to say. I believe this was right outside of I believe this was in San Antonio. On Tuesday night, in what might be a harbinger of things to come, the GOP turned a state House district that is roughly 75% Hispanic from blue to red, as GOP House candidate John Lujan won the seat in Texas' 118th House of Representatives district. Yeah, see, look, there's a pretty picture of him right from the Republican State Leadership Committee. Very nice. Juan Lujan. Lujan? I don't know. We're not Lujan. Ugh. The Texas Tribune reported the victory by Lujan gives Republicans an early win in the drive to make new inroads in the South Texas after President Joe Biden, underperformed last year. With all vote centers reporting Tuesday night, Lujan was leading Democrat Frank Ramirez 51% to 48%, according to unofficial results. Lujan briefly held the seat in 2016, while Ramirez is a former staffer for the San Antonio City Council and the Texas legislature. The seat was last represented by Democratic Representative Leo Pacheco, who resigned August 19, 2021 to teach public administration in San Antonio. So that's what triggered the special election. American Community Survey according to a 2015-2019 American Community Survey with analysis by Texas Legislative Council Research Division, the 18th district was 73.4% Hispanic. The Daily Wire reported in mid-September. According to a new report in Texas Monthly, Democrats who have been hoping to turn the state of Texas blue are facing the stark realization the Hispanic vote they seemingly take for granted is far more conservative than they're willing to admit. Yeah, we could have told you most Hispanics are Catholic, or were at least raised Catholic. Like, there's a lot of conservative values in there. Whether you want to believe it or not, the color of our skin does not define who we are, no matter how much the Democrats would like to think that way. The Texas Monthly notes, last year, McAllen experienced the biggest shift in party vote share toward Donald Trump of any large city in the country, save for Laredo, 150 miles to the northwest. In both border towns, Trump improved his 2016 results by more than 23 points. No area fled further into the GOP camp than South Texas, where 18% of state Hispanics population lives. In Starr County, just up the river from McAllen, Republicans increased their turnout by almost 300% between 2016 and 2020. The Texas Monthly adds, while Hillary Clinton won there by 60 points, Joe Biden barely scraped out a 5-point victory. In Webb County, home of Laredo, Trump cut his 2016 margin of defeat by more than half. And in Zapatito County, which didn't even have a local Republican party, Trump became the first GOP presidential candidate to win since Warren G. Harding was on the ballot a century ago. Holy crap. Of the 4 million new residents that Texas gained in the last decade, nearly 2 million were Latino. Only 5% were white. The Washington Post reported in August. The Monthly posited that many Texas Hispanics actively rejecting being cast as immigrants. In 2020, ignorance of these facts embarrassed state and national Democrats. While Hispanic South Texans are proud of their Mexican heritage, many do not consider themselves to be people of color at all. No, they're Americans. On the 2020 census, 53% of Americans who answered that they were Hispanic or Latino also marked the race as white, the Monthly pointed out. Last year in Starr County, where 96% of respondents were Hispanic, almost 99% identified as white. Such as results were common across South Texas, where 79% of Hispanics residents identify as white, substantially more than the 62% who do so statewide. In Laredo, 95% of respondents marked Hispanic or Latino, making it the second most Hispanic city in the country, and 96% identified as white. So yeah, so big win in Texas. That's really awesome. One step closer, as JC Jetton, I believe, put it this morning on Twitter, one step closer to having that 100-seat majority we need in the Texas House to make sure that the Democrats cannot pull the BS they did and walk out like they did last time to make it to where we can't have a quorum. So that's one more little step in the right direction. So let's check this out real quick. So now on to Virginia. So Virginia was one that everybody was looking really, really closely at. So this right here says, this is from ABC News 1 hour ago, Republican Glenn Youngkin projected to win Virginia's governor race. That's basically already been absolutely nailed down. Everybody agrees that Youngkin's won the governor's race. It's not even, I think it's close, but it's within, it's within a few percentage points. I think Youngkin ended up winning by. We'll look and see if we can find the final results. I think I'm going to do a New York Times article here in a second. So Republican Glenn Youngkin, a former private equity executive running his first campaign for political office, will be the next governor of Virginia, ABC News has projected. My fellow Virginians, we started here this morning at this defining moment, a defining moment that, yes, started with 2 people on a walk, and defining moment that is now millions of Virginians walking together. Youngkin said around 1 a.m. Wednesday at his election night headquarters in Chantilly, Virginia. Together we will change the trajectory of this Commonwealth, friends. Friends, we are going to start that transformation on day 1. ABC News also projected Republican Winsome Sears, a former member of the House of Delegates, as the winner for the lieutenant governor race, but has not yet projected the attorney general race. My understanding is with the attorney general race, it's also the Republican also won, who I believe is of Hispanic descent. I think he's like Puerto Rican or something, is what I heard. So that's really cool too. But yeah, Republican Winsome Sears, which a lot of people like, it's so funny. If this was a Democrat, they would have put in there that she was a black veteran. But they didn't put that in here because she doesn't meet their qualifications. But yeah, she's actually a black female Marine that just won that lieutenant governorship in the state of Virginia, which, if anybody remembers, Virginia was one of the 13 colonies that had, one of the 2 out of the 13 colonies that had slaves, which is the reason why we didn't call out the King of England for slavery in the Declaration of Independence, because Virginia still had slaves and wanted to keep their slaves. So that right there is historic in and of itself. And then I don't care about what McLaughlin said. He's like, oh, last night we came up short. I'm proud we spent the campaign fighting for the values we so deeply believe in. This guy literally tried turning it into a campaign all about Trump. There was a really hilarious montage that I'll have to link on one of our social medias at some point after this video is posted, showing you guys it was a Youngkin ad. It was one of the Youngkin campaign ads. It literally just showed this guy talking about Trump, nonstop during all of his interviews with mainstream media and everywhere else he went. It was just disgusting. This wasn't about Trump. This was about schools and everything else. Okay, so let's get into the New York Times article because that actually talks about that a little bit better. So here we go. New York Times. Rough night for Democrats expose the party's weakness, which is really funny, though, because if you go up here and look at where the actual title is, I don't think you guys can see it, but initially the article was titled "What Youngkin's Win in the Virginia's Governor Race Means for," I'm assuming, Democrats. But now you can tell they changed the headline because they don't want to praise Youngkin too hard, I'm assuming. Rough night for Democrats exposes the party's weakness. Even the New York Times sees it. Less than a year after taking power in Washington, the party faces a grim immediate future, struggling to energize voters without a presidential foil and losing messaging wars to Republicans. The menacing thunder couldn't get much louder for Democrats. Few in the party had high hopes for their era of rule in Washington would last beyond the midterms of election years. Let's try that again. Few in the party had high hopes that their era of rule in Washington would last beyond the midterm elections next year. But the Republican resurgent on Tuesday in Virginia, a state that President Biden won by 10 percentage points, okay? This was a deep blue 10-plus state that Youngkin won in last night. And surprising strength in solidly blue New Jersey offer a vivid warning of the storm clouds gathering as Democrats look warily to the horizon. The New Jersey governor race is still a dead, neck and neck tie. I think it's within a few hundred votes of each other. They're still waiting, I think, on some democratically generally controlled areas to count all the rest of their votes. So, big shocker there. There's funny vote counting, and it's taking a long time in New Jersey. And the Republican might win. So they're taking extra long time to count the votes. Remind you of anything? Shh. All right. Not assuming anything. Just, bringing that up. All right. 10 points. New Jersey offered a vivid warning the storm clouds gathering on the Democrats as the Democrats look warily to the horizon. For 5 years, the party rode record-breaking turnouts to victory, fueled by voters with a passion for ousting a president they viewed as incompetent, divisive, or worse. Tuesday's results showed the limitations of such resistance politics when the object of resistance is out of power. The failure of Democrats to fulfill many of their biggest campaign promises, and still simmering rage over a pandemic that transformed schools into some of the country's most divisive political backgrounds. Or divisive, whatever. In Virginia, the Democratic nominee for governor, Terry McAuliffe, was beaten with relative ease by Glenn Youngkin, a Republican private equity executive and political newcomer. In New Jersey, Governor Phil Murphy, a Democrat, faced a stunningly close race. So they're probably already trying to call it for Murphy because it's the Democrat vote places are the last places to be counted. But either way, it was last I saw, it was within hundreds of votes of each other. Faced a stunningly close race after being expected to coast to victory. Not so much anymore, boys and girls. In Minneapolis, voters rejected a ballot measure pushed by progressives that would have replaced the police department with a public safety department. Yeah, that probably wasn't working out so well. Perhaps most strikingly, the crushing setbacks for Democrats in heavenly suburban Virginia and New Jersey hinted at a conservative-stoked backlash to the changing mores around race and identity championed by the party, as Republicans relentlessly sought to turn schools into the next front in the country's culture wars. That's because the other side did it in like the 70s and 80s when they took over the school systems. For Democrats, y'all turned schools into the next culture war when you started teaching racism in school and then teaching that those of us with different backgrounds other than white are less than the white people and the white people are evil. Yeah, that's what you guys did that to our schools. For Democrats, the results on the nation's single biggest day of voting until the midterms next year raised alarms that the wave of anti-Trump energy that carried them into power has curdled into apathy and a base that is tired of protesting and is largely back at brunch. Nice. Or in what would be even more politically perilous, that the party's motivation has been replaced by a sense of dissatisfaction with the state of a country that has, despite all of Mr. Biden's campaign promises, not yet returned to a pre-COVID sense of normalcy. In the coming days, Democratic anxieties and recriminations over the party's loss in Virginia, the marquee race of the off-year elections, will echo from those suburban swing districts to Capitol Hill as the midterm map extends into areas once considered safer for Democrats. That means they're worried. Even before the race was officially called for Mr. Youngkin, Democratic strategists were calling for their party to examine whether continuing to focus on Mr. Trump remained the best strategy. It's not. Particularly after an election in which Mr. Biden promised his supporters that they would no longer have to worry about or even think about the round-the-clock drama of the previous administration. The Democrats need to take a serious look at how we choose to engage with Trump narrative, said Dan Sinha, a Democratic strategist who helped the party win the House in 2018. This was an election where the Democrats did not lean into their accomplishments either in Virginia or nationally. It's because they don't have any. The whole country is on fire. And as we look to 2022, we're going to have to ask some hard questions about whether that's the right strategy. Duh. Did I say that out loud? My apologies. Off-year elections have never been perfect predictors of future success, and even before the Virginia race tightened in late August, the national environment looked inauspicious for Democrats, who may lose seats in redistricting and face the historical trend of a president's party losing seats during his first term in office. It's going to be a red wave. It's going to be an absolute insanity. But in the state where elections tend to be interwoven with national politics because of the proximity to Washington, D.C., it's hard to separate Mr. McAuliffe's defeat from worsening views of the administration. In the week before the election day, likely voters in Virginia disapproved of Mr. Biden's job performance by 53% to 46%. According to a Washington Post Scholar poll, 44% of voters in the state strongly disapproved of the president's Even worse, some Democrats, significant majorities now believe the country is headed in the wrong direction. Yeah, no shit. Republicans argue that Democrats and Mr. McAuliffe's campaign failed to address what was behind the scenes of the decline. Increased costs of groceries and gas caused by inflation, continued frustration with schools, supply chain challenges, and crime. When you look Over the horizon for next year, the red wave is coming, said Corey Bliss, a top Republican strategist working for a number of congressional candidates, who added that Democrats in Washington were not fighting about the things that normal people care about. True. As the country's political pendulums appeared to swing back to the right, Republicans crowed their party had hit upon a playbook. I'm continuing reading this because there's a little line in here I want to get to. For the candidates to replace, Democrats argued that history worked against Mr. McAuliffe. The candidate had not been occupying the White House, yada, 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 except Mr. McAuliffe was the one who did upset that back in the 2013 term. Okay. Moderate Democrats argued that defeat was a sign that Congress must immediately pass the party's infrastructure bill, regardless of what happens with the shrunken version of Mr. Biden's legislative agenda. The left blamed the failure of the party to push a broader agenda, including overturning the filibuster to pass liberal priorities like bills protecting the right to vote. And political strategists fear that the party is failing to adequately communicate what Democrats have already done to help the COVID-ravaged country and why they haven't delivered on issues too important to their base. Bullshit! Middle of America doesn't want this garbage, and that's why you lost in Virginia, and that's why you came this damn close to losing in New Jersey, and you probably should have if it wasn't for other things. I'm worried, honestly, said Adrian Soffer, the executive director of the Black PAC. I don't care. Said voters of color has been disappointed by the inability of Democrats to pass laws. People don't want to be gaslighted about what's on voting rights and criminal justice. People don't want to be gaslighted about what's not happening and why they're being told everything is great. Here we go. Begged the White House to pass for infrastructure bill. That wasn't going to do you any good. Less aggressive approach to another. Schools. With a focus on parental rights, a catch-call rallying cry capturing conservative outrage over mask mandates, vaccination requirements, transgender rights, and how the history of racism is taught, Republicans found an issue that energized their voters. Uniting the white grievances politics of Trump's base with a broader anger over schooling during the pandemic. Even though Mr. Youngkin offered little, yeah. Little addressed the endemic problems facing education that have worsened because of the coronavirus. Schools became the central battleground for the campaign, rivaling the economy as the most significant issue for likely voters in the final week of the race, according to surveys. By promising so this is where, once again, here we go. This is what I was waiting for. By promising at nearly every campaign to stop to ban critical race theory, an advanced academic concept not taught in Virginia schools. Okay, bullshit. They are using Mr. Youngkin resurrected Republican race baiting tactics in a state that once served as the capital of the Confederacy. They're trying to blame this on white supremacy. They're trying to blame this on racism. They're trying to say that a bunch of white people got together in Virginia and voted this guy in. Okay. For one, critical race theory is taught. They are playing a semantic game. If you go back and watch any of my videos on critical race theory, if you watch the speech I gave on critical race theory at the Annaville Baptist Church, you will understand the tactics that they do. They are playing a semantic game. They do not officially teach critical race theory as it is. No, they take it and they apply it to history. They apply it to school activities. They apply it in the real world. So they're not teaching the actual technical theory. No, they're applying it to the real world and using critical race theory and all of its ideas and all of its ilk to take it and divide students by color, race, sex, or national origin and teach them that every one of them are different and wrong, or some of them are oppressors and some of them are oppressed based strictly on the color of their skin. Okay? There was a privilege walk here in Corpus Christi at an elementary school involving teachers. So don't give me that bullshit. No, this shit's not being taught. It's being applied. It's being used. It's being formalized. Okay? So, now that I've got to the racist part of this freaking article, let me show you what Virginia's new lieutenant governor looks like. This is from her speech from last night. Does she look like a white supremacist to you? Okay? That new lieutenant governor is a female, black, Marine immigrant. Her family came from Jamaica. Her dad brought her here when she was 6 years old, during the height of the civil rights movement. And her dad said, guess what? It's still better in America. And without even being a U.S. citizen, she enlisted in the Marine Corps here in the United States because America had already given her so much from the age of 6 to 18 that she did something that 99% of the people in this country will never do: serve in the armed forces. So don't give me this bullshit about that Virginia was about racism or that New Jersey was white backlash or any of the rest of it. It's garbage. It's bullshit. We're tired of your critical race theory bullshit corrupting our children. We're tired of all your critical theory garbage, whether it comes to sex, race, religion, or anything else, poisoning the minds of our children. We want common sense, reasonable people running this country and not these insane propagandist, leftist radicals out there. And the Virginia race proves it. And people ask me, why do I, someone in Texas, care so much about what happened in that Virginia race? Somebody asked me that this morning, and I'm going to tell you what I told them. Because this shows the tide is turning. All right? We kind of figured California was a lost cause. And Larry Elder didn't win. We were hopeful, but it didn't happen. And it was as expected. So, this is what hope looks like. This is what turning the tide looks like. Virginia, a 10-plus state for Biden in the last election, just elected a Republican conservative governor, a black female Marine immigrant as lieutenant governor, and if they end up getting the attorney general spot too, you'll have a Hispanic attorney general in Virginia, folks. Like the New York Times so eloquently pointed out, the former capital of the Confederacy, or at least a former capital of the Confederacy. Your race politics bullshit doesn't work anymore. No one believes you. If there are racists left in this country, they're few and far between, and keep it to themselves. Republicans aren't racist. I'm not a racist. No one I know are racists. The only people we don't like are liberal psychopath Democrats that are trying to poison our children and destroy our way of life. This is America. If you believe in the Bill of Rights and you believe in the Constitution, then you stand with us and you're not part of the cult. You're not part of the woke crowd because you still believe in the Constitution. And those are the people we're looking to stand with. And Virginia shows us that the tide is turning. All hope is not lost. We will get through this as long as we stand with God, we stand by His morals, His values, and we stand with the truth. We will overcome this insanity that has gripped our country. And we'll be better for it on the other side because we have woken up so many people. So stand strong, America. Stand strong, Texas. There is hope. This fight is not over. The tide is turning and people are waking up more and more every day. Thanks for watching. This is Jesse with the Common Man Corpus Christi. Have a good day.